Avery Lane wiped grease from her hands with a worn rag, her eyes never leaving the sleek frame of the F-22 Raptor resting on the tarmac under the dim glow of floodlights. The base was quiet this late at night, almost eerily so, except for the soft hum of the jet's systems running diagnostics. Around her, the hangar's massive doors loomed like silent guardians, reflecting the faint neon lights that lined the perimeter. To the untrained eye, Avery looked like any other mechanic on the base. Coveralls streaked with oil, hair tied back in a practical ponytail, a few scratches on her hands from years of hard work. Yet despite the ordinary exterior, Avery was anything but ordinary. In her mind, the aircraft before her was more than just metal and wires. It was a puzzle, a symphony of technology that only someone who understood every circuit, sensor, and line of code could truly read. Pilots passed her without a second glance, joking quietly to each other. "There goes the grease monkey," one said, smirking as he adjusted his flight jacket. Avery didn't react. She had long since grown accustomed to being underestimated. It was almost comforting. People rarely expected much from her, and that meant she could move through the shadows of the base unseen, doing the work that truly mattered. Avery crouched beside the landing gear, her fingers dancing over the access panel controls with precision. Each movement was deliberate, practiced, almost ritualistic. She had spent countless hours learning the systems of this jet, more than most pilots ever would. Her background in advanced systems engineering and autonomous flight interfaces had been classified for years, the kind of knowledge that could make or break missions if placed in the wrong hands. Yet here she was, officially only a mechanical systems technician, relegated to tightening bolts and running routine diagnostics, while the people who assumed they were the elite flew around in glorified cockpits. The F-22 she worked on wasn't just any fighter jet. This was one of the base's experimental models, a prototype outfitted with a cutting-edge, voice-integrated interface that had been rumored, never confirmed, to respond to specific human commands under certain conditions. A technology ahead of its time, shelved in secrecy due to bureaucratic disputes and budget cuts. And Avery had been one of the lead architects. She had seen this system in its infancy, seen the potential it had to change aviation forever. But no one here knew that. No one ever would if she didn't choose to reveal it. As she ran her gloved fingers along the control panel, she murmured softly, almost instinctively, "Neural link, check response, verify pathways, engage override test." The jet responded with a faint, almost imperceptible hum. Sensors flickered and the landing gear adjusted minutely as if acknowledging her presence. Avery smiled faintly to herself. This was the part they didn't see. The pilots, the commanders, the casual observers all assumed she was tinkering with machinery. But she was talking to it, communicating in a language few could understand. The F-22 listened. A sudden noise pulled Avery from her focus, footsteps echoing against the concrete hangar floor. She glanced up and saw a group of young pilots walking by, laughing at some inside joke she couldn't hear. One of them, a tall man with a carefully maintained mustache, leaned over to a friend. "Bet she thinks she can fly it," he whispered. Avery's lips twitched in a smirk, but she didn't respond. She had heard that line countless times, and each repetition reminded her why she preferred the shadows. Let them underestimate her. They didn't need to know. They wouldn't believe it anyway. The quiet of the night returned, broken only by the soft clicking of Avery's tools. She began to run through the diagnostic protocol she had memorized years ago, fingers flying over the touchpad, connecting the jet to the diagnostic modules she had built herself. Every wire, every connection, every sensor feed came to life under her touch. She spoke commands softly, and the aircraft responded in tiny, almost imperceptible movements, a subtle tilt of the nose, a shift of the control surfaces. These were tests, nothing more. But even these small responses were enough to make Avery's pulse quicken. It reminded her that the system still remembered her, still trusted her. She thought back to her childhood in Nevada, to evenings spent staring at the stars through a telescope, dreaming of flight. Avery's fascination with planes wasn't about glory. It was about understanding, about control, about mastering something most people never noticed. She had spent years learning everything about flight and engineering, more than most pilots ever would. It had been a lonely path, college professors who doubted her, internship coordinators who underestimated her, and eventually, the government contractors who hired her but never gave her authority. Yet every obstacle had only sharpened her skills. She had learned patience, precision, and how to wait for the perfect moment to show the world what she could do. Her hands paused over the touchpad and she closed her eyes briefly. In that silence, she could almost feel the heartbeat of the F-22 beneath her. Not a mechanical pulse, but something more, the quiet rhythm of advanced engineering, waiting for the right voice to awaken it. Avery whispered again, testing the neural interface. Systems check. Override enabled. A small light blinked green. A sigh of satisfaction escaped her lips. Everything was responding perfectly. It was a simple test, but to Avery it felt monumental. Somewhere far above, Lieutenant Evan Rhodes observed from a walkway. He had just arrived on base and had noticed her badge, the name, the credentials. Something about her presence unsettled him, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made him feel he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. He didn't know what she was capable of yet, but instinct told him it was significant. She moved like someone with authority, though the uniform didn't give her any. Her calm, deliberate actions spoke of expertise far beyond the mechanics of the base. Rhodes watched as she continued her work, unaware of being observed. A sudden alert on the diagnostic panel caught Avery's attention. A minor anomaly in the flight interface. Not dangerous, not serious, but detectable only to someone who truly knew the system. She tapped a few commands, voice soft but precise. Raptor, isolate error, run subsystem loop. The jet responded, its sensors pulsing, calibrating, aligning. Rhodes's jaw tightened. No pilot had ever been able to coax such precision from this aircraft. And yet here she was, commanding it with ease, a whisper of authority that no one else seemed capable of issuing. As she finished the test, Avery stepped back, brushing dust from her coveralls. She looked up at the night sky, at the stars, thinking of all the people who had told her she wasn't ready, that she didn't belong. Here, alone with the F-22, she belonged more than anyone else. This was her world, her domain. And though the pilots might never know it, though the base might never recognize her genius, she had the quiet satisfaction of knowing she was capable of extraordinary things. Avery turned, slipping back toward the hangar exit, her footsteps silent. The F-22 settled into its quiet hum once more, sensors idle, systems ready. The jet had listened, it had obeyed, and it would remember her. In the shadows of the base, amidst the routine drills, the casual jokes, and the overlooked personnel, Avery Lane remained unseen, but far from powerless. And when the right moment came, she would reveal just how much a mechanic could do. Lieutenant Evan Rhodes paced slowly along the catwalk above the hangar, his eyes fixed on Avery Lane below. Something about her movements didn't match her coveralls, didn't match the image of a mere mechanic that everyone else seemed to hold. Her hands glided over the F-22's interface with ease, a quiet authority that betrayed knowledge far beyond what her title suggested. Rhodes had only recently arrived at Nellis Air Force Base, fresh from flight school and eager to prove himself. Yet the moment he saw Avery in action, he felt an unfamiliar mix of curiosity and unease. He had noticed her badge earlier that day, an identifier that marked her as a civilian contractor, and something about it nagged at him. Most contractors he'd encountered had specialized roles, IT, logistics, sometimes weapons systems, but nothing that warranted this level of focus on an F-22. He had spent a few minutes digging through her personnel files, and what he found left him stunned. Avery Lane had once worked on a DARPA program for autonomous fighter jets. The program had been ambitious, designed to integrate voice command protocols into military aircraft, allowing engineers on the ground to execute emergency maneuvers if pilots were incapacitated. It had been canceled years ago due to funding cuts and security concerns. And Avery had been a lead architect. Rhodes blinked, rereading the lines on the document. She was no ordinary mechanic. She wasn't just fixing landing gear or replacing faulty sensors. She had designed the very system he had only read about in classified briefs, the system that could theoretically allow a human voice to control one of the deadliest fighter jets in existence. The idea seemed preposterous at first. Who would believe that a mechanic could wield such authority over an F-22? But what he saw tonight confirmed it. Avery crouched beside the jet's engine compartment, muttering softly as her fingers danced over the interface. Every connection, every diagnostic module, every sensor feed responded as she spoke. It was subtle, a micro-adjustment of the landing gear, a slight tilt of the nose, a flicker of the control screens, but to Rhodes it was unmistakable. She was speaking a language only the F-22 could understand. He couldn't help but recall the pilot briefings he had attended earlier. The experimental F-22, newly delivered, had already developed a reputation for erratic behavior. Pilots complained that the jet's advanced interface seemed to resist their inputs at times, misinterpreting commands, or refusing to engage certain systems altogether. The rumor mill had spun wild stories. "The jet has a mind of its own," one captain joked. The reality, Rhodes realized, was far simpler and far more terrifying. The F-22 wasn't faulty. It had been designed to obey commands from someone like Avery, but no one had ever tested it with her voice before. He leaned against the railing, arms crossed, watching her work. He noticed the way she spoke to the machine softly, almost conversationally, yet with a clarity and precision that left no room for error. "Isolate Sensor 3, run Feedback Loop Alpha, verify wing control surfaces." The jet responded. A light blinked green, a control surface shifted minutely, and the engine diagnostics reported a stabilized reading. Rhodes felt a chill run down his spine. No pilot had ever coaxed such precision out of the system, and yet here she was, commanding the jet with effortless authority. A noise behind him drew his attention. A group of pilots had wandered into the hangar, joking loudly and unaware of the significance of Avery's actions. "There she goes again," one muttered. "Just a mechanic thinking she's some kind of prodigy." Another snickered. "I swear she talks to the jet more than she talks to people." Rhodes gritted his teeth, frustrated at their ignorance. They couldn't see what he saw. They couldn't see that the jet was listening, that it was obeying her. Avery didn't glance up at the voices. She ignored the laughter, focusing entirely on the F-22. Years of being underestimated had taught her the value of patience. She had learned to move in silence, to let her skills speak for themselves. The engineers and pilots around her were distractions, temporary obstacles in the path of the jet's proper calibration. She knew that when the time came, the world would see her true capabilities. But tonight her role was simple: ensure the system was operational. Rhodes stepped down from the walkway, moving closer without making a sound. He wanted to speak to her, but he didn't want to interrupt. His mind raced with questions. Why had she been relegated to a mechanic role after all her work with DARPA? Why had her contributions been erased from the official narrative? Most importantly, what could she do with the F-22 if she chose to reveal herself? Avery finally looked up, her eyes meeting Rhodes's briefly. There was a spark of recognition, not fear, but a subtle acknowledgement that he understood at least partially what she was doing. He nodded, hesitant, as if to say, "I see you." She returned to her work, voice soft but commanding. "Engage auxiliary systems. Run flight simulation diagnostic. Confirm neural link alignment." The jet responded instantly, systems humming with precise efficiency. Rhodes felt a growing sense of awe. The F-22 shifted slightly on the tarmac, its engines purring like a living creature. It was responsive in a way that defied conventional logic, obeying Avery's voice with perfect accuracy. Rhodes realized then that she was not just maintaining the aircraft, she was conversing with it. She was guiding it, controlling it, commanding it in ways that no pilot ever could. For a moment the hangar seemed to fade away. The lights, the shadows, the snickering pilots all became irrelevant. There was only Avery and the jet. He could see the bond between them, a silent understanding forged in code and circuits. Rhodes felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. Here was a woman who had been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, yet she held authority over one of the most advanced machines on the planet, and the world above would never expect it. A sudden chirp from the diagnostic module brought them both back to reality. Avery leaned in, making minute adjustments, her hands flying over the touchpad. She spoke again, her voice crisp and precise. Confirm flight control responses. Verify emergency override protocols. Stand by for system stabilization. The jet's control surfaces responded, aligning perfectly. Rhodes couldn't suppress a low whistle. Even he, trained to fly and manage advanced aircraft, had never seen anything like this. Avery straightened, wiping her hands on the rag again. She glanced at Rhodes, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Not many people see it," she said quietly. Rhodes nodded, unsure how to respond. He had always expected to witness incredible technology in action, but he had never expected to see a human voice control it so seamlessly. He realized that Avery Lane was more than a mechanic. She was the linchpin of a system that could change the future of military aviation. The hangar doors creaked as a breeze slipped through, ruffling her hair. Pilots continued to wander past, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding beneath their feet. Avery didn't care. She had long learned the value of patience, of letting the right moment arrive. Rhodes stayed nearby, watching, realizing that she was waiting for the moment when her skills would no longer be dismissed, when her voice would finally be heard, and the F-22 would obey her commands without hesitation. And in that moment, the seed of change had already been planted. Avery Lane, the overlooked genius, the quiet mechanic, had reminded the world and herself that true power often comes from those who are least expected to wield it. The night air hung heavy over Nellis Air Force Base, tinged with the scent of jet fuel and ozone. Avery Lane crouched beside the F-22 Raptor, her hands moving deftly across the access panels. Her voice was soft, almost conversational as she issued commands to the jet. Engage diagnostic loop. Confirm auxiliary systems. Stabilize sensor arrays. For anyone else, it would have seemed like a ritualistic muttering, an engineer reciting technical jargon. But Rhodes, who had followed her silently to the hangar floor, watched with awe as the aircraft responded. Tiny lights flickered on the console. The control surfaces shifted minutely. The engines adjusted their idle pitch as if acknowledging her words. "Impossible," Rhodes muttered under his breath. He had seen experimental systems, he had read the manuals, he had studied the classified files, but nothing in his training prepared him for this. Avery's words were more than commands. They were a key, unlocking the latent intelligence of the jet. It was alive in a way he had never witnessed, not mechanical life, but controlled, precise, responsive intelligence that obeyed her voice alone. The F-22, the most advanced fighter jet in the world, listened to her. Meanwhile, pilots passing through the hangar laughed and whispered. "It's just a fluke," one said, shaking his head. "No machine obeys a human voice like that." Another added, "She probably just pressed a hidden override." Avery ignored them, accustomed to the ridicule. Years of being underestimated had taught her the value of silence, the patience to let her results speak louder than words. She focused entirely on the jet, her mind running calculations faster than any computer in the hangar. A sudden alert flashed on the control console, a minor anomaly in the neural interface. Most mechanics would have panicked, calling for backup or reporting the glitch. Avery leaned in, fingers flying across the touchpad, issuing precise commands. Isolate subsystem gamma, recalibrate auxiliary sensors, stand by for system realignment. The F-22 responded instantly. Its flight surfaces adjusted, sensors realigned, engine diagnostics normalized. Rhodes's jaw tightened. No pilot could have achieved this, only Avery, whose voice had become a literal control system for the aircraft. For a moment, Rhodes feared someone would notice and question her authority, but the pilots were still laughing, still assuming she was just a mechanic. Avery's smile was faint but knowing. Let them believe that. She had long ago accepted that recognition could be delayed. What mattered was the jet obeyed her. That was proof enough. She didn't need their approval. The hum of the engine seemed to pulse with life as she moved around the aircraft, issuing commands and observing responses. Run full system diagnostics, confirm neural link synchronization, prepare flight readiness check. The Raptor's lights blinked in precise sequence. The landing gear adjusted minutely, leveling the aircraft perfectly on the tarmac. The subtle shifts were almost imperceptible, but Rhodes could see the synchronicity between Avery's voice and the jet systems. It was perfect, like a conversation between two minds, one human, one machine, each understanding the other without hesitation. Suddenly, the jet twitched violently, a reflexive reaction to a sensor overload. Most pilots would have panicked, calling for an immediate shutdown. Avery, however, didn't flinch. She spoke again, her tone calm but commanding. Stabilize, override manual lock, reinitialize auxiliary arrays. Slowly, the aircraft's movements became smooth again. The F-22 settled into alignment, obedient as a trained falcon returning to its handler. Rhodes stepped closer, heart pounding, marveling at the unshakable control she wielded over the machine. As she worked, Avery recalled the early days of the DARPA program, the countless nights spent perfecting voice command protocols. The neural interface she had designed wasn't just a tool, it was an extension of human intention, a way to translate thought and speech into precise mechanical action. She had tested it with simulations, with unmanned drones, with small-scale fighters, but never with an F-22. This was the ultimate test, though she did not think of it that way. For her, it was simply routine. The jet was listening, and she had to guide it properly. From across the hangar, Rhodes could not tear his eyes away. He had read about autonomous systems, seen them in simulations, even observed them in flight labs, but none had ever displayed the level of responsiveness he now witnessed. The aircraft reacted as if Avery's words were law, bending metal, circuitry, and software into obedient harmony. A small part of him worried about the consequences if someone discovered this. Military protocol was rigid, and no civilian was supposed to control an experimental fighter jet. But another part of him marveled at the ingenuity, the skill, the sheer brilliance of Avery Lane. The hum of the jet's systems shifted again, almost as if the machine were recognizing Rhodes' presence. Avery noticed his gaze and gave him a brief nod, her attention never leaving the interface. Rhodes understood the subtlety. She acknowledged him, but only as an observer. The jet did not obey him, and it never would. Its loyalty, so to speak, was already clear. The F-22 responded to her voice and no one else. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. Avery moved through a series of complex checks, each more intricate than the last. She tested response latencies, sensor overlaps, and emergency override protocols. She spoke clearly and deliberately, each command forming a thread that wove the jet into a tapestry of controlled precision. The landing gear adjusted in real time, wing flaps responded instantly, engine diagnostics hummed in perfect harmony. Every action she took, every word she spoke, brought the jet closer to perfection. Finally, she leaned back, wiping a thin film of sweat from her forehead. The F-22 sat before her, idle but alive, humming softly, fully operational and perfectly stable. Rhodes exhaled, feeling a mix of relief and astonishment. For the first time, he understood the magnitude of what he had witnessed. Avery Lane, the mechanic everyone overlooked, had just demonstrated control over one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. And she had done it with nothing more than her knowledge, precision, and voice. As the first hints of dawn crept into the hangar, casting long shadows over the polished surfaces of the Raptor, Avery stood up straight. Her work tonight was complete, but the real test had yet to come, the Pentagon demonstration. The jet would need to perform flawlessly, and the pilots, the very people who doubted her, would be in the spotlight. Avery's calm demeanor belied the storm brewing on the horizon. She knew that when the time came, she would have to prove not just her skill, but the very system she had helped create. And whether the pilots liked it or not, the F-22 would obey her voice. Rhodes followed her silently as she moved toward the exit, his mind still racing. The night had changed everything. Avery Lane was no ordinary mechanic. She was the key to a secret that could redefine aerial combat. And for the first time, he realized the truth. The world above the hangar, the pilots who mocked her, the Pentagon observers, none of them had any idea just how much power one quiet voice could wield. In the quiet aftermath, the hangar seemed still. The F-22 sat obedient and silent, yet Rhodes could feel its readiness, its potential energy waiting to be called into action. And Avery Lane, who had long been overlooked and underestimated, had already proven one undeniable truth. She commanded the jet and nothing else mattered. The following morning, the hangar buzzed with activity, though Avery Lane moved through it like a ghost. The pilots had arrived, striding confidently toward the F-22, their polished boots clanging against the concrete. Some were already whispering to each other, throwing glances her way, their smirks heavy with mockery. "There's the greaser," one muttered under his breath. "Bet she's still talking to that jet." Another chuckled, shaking his head. "She probably thinks it'll start flying for her." Avery didn't flinch. She had long since grown used to such treatment. Let them talk. She knew the truth. She had control they couldn't even dream of. Lieutenant Rhodes followed silently from the edge of the hangar, his notebook in hand. He had watched Avery work the previous night and had been both awed and unsettled by the precision she commanded. To the untrained eye, she was a simple mechanic, tinkering with wires and panels. To him, she was orchestrating the heartbeat of a fighter jet. He had tried to approach her earlier to speak, but she had waved him off with a small, polite smile. There was a distance in her, a quiet patience that spoke volumes. She did not need validation. But tonight, the demonstration would force recognition. The pilots gathered around the F-22, running pre-flight checks and commenting loudly on the jet's quirks. "This thing's temperamental," one said. "Bet the tech can't fix that." Another laughed. "Yeah, she probably just talks sweet to it until it behaves." Their jokes, casual and derisive, filled the hangar with a false confidence. Avery ignored them, crouching beside the engine compartment and muttering soft commands under her breath. Every micro-adjustment, every subtle recalibration, was a reminder that she understood the jet in a way the pilots could never. Major Thomas, a seasoned pilot with years of experience, approached, his tone sharp and dismissive. "Lane," he called, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Step aside, this is pilot territory." Avery looked up at him calmly, brushing dust from her coveralls. "The system needs verification before it can be cleared for flight," she said softly, his brow furrowed. "Verification, that's your job, mechanic, not ours." He waved a dismissive hand toward the jet as if it were a simple toy. Avery didn't respond. Words meant little to him. Action mattered. Rhodes stepped closer, nodding the subtle frustration in her movements. She was careful not to let it show, but he could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tapped lightly on the console as she ran silent diagnostics. "They'll never listen," he whispered. "You know that, right?" Avery tilted her head slightly, acknowledging him without taking her eyes off the jet. "Let them underestimate me," she replied. "It's safer that way." The pilots continued their preparations, oblivious to the meticulous orchestration happening before them. They inspected the jet's exterior, checked fuel lines, and adjusted cockpit settings, all the while snickering about Avery's supposed incompetence. "I bet she talks to this thing like it's a dog," one said, laughing. "Sit, Raptor. Good bird." The others joined in, echoing his mockery. Avery remained silent, issuing low commands to the F-22 that were invisible to everyone but the machine. Every word was a thread weaving the jet systems into perfect alignment. A quiet symphony that the pilots couldn't hear, couldn't see, and wouldn't understand. As the morning wore on, the tension in the hangar shifted slightly. The jet, fully operational under Avery's guidance, hummed softly, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Rhodes watched as she moved with quiet authority, testing Neuralink protocols and running pre-flight simulations. Each test she performed demonstrated precision far beyond anything the pilots could achieve. Yet they dismissed it, laughing and shaking their heads. They couldn't see the truth. The F-22 was obeying her voice. Every adjustment, every response, was a testament to her mastery. Major Thomas grew impatient. "Enough of this," he barked, clapping his hands. "Lane, step back. We'll handle the system's checks ourselves." Avery's hands froze briefly, then continued working with calm determination. She knew the jet would respond only if she allowed it to, and she also knew it was fully capable of bypassing any unauthorized input. Her mind raced, anticipating potential errors in pilot commands. This demonstration could go badly if they didn't respect the system's limits, limits she understood better than anyone. Rhodes shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension. Avery, despite her quiet demeanor, radiated authority. The pilots mocked her, yes, but the jet listened to her alone. That was undeniable. She issued one final series of commands under her breath. Stabilize wing surfaces. Engage auxiliary systems. Prepare for flight interface override test. The Raptor responded immediately, its systems humming smoothly, landing gear perfectly aligned, engines running optimally. Rhodes's breath caught in his throat. The pilots stared at the jet, oblivious to the precision behind it. One of them muttered, "Huh, looks normal." Another laughed. "Yeah, but that's probably just luck." Avery suppressed a smile. Luck had nothing to do with it. This was skill, knowledge, and experience distilled into control over a machine that none of them could touch. The tension was broken when a voice echoed over the intercom, a Pentagon liaison confirming the scheduled demonstration in 2 days. The pilots' eyes lit up, their confidence restored, unaware of the chaos that could ensue if they tried to fly the jet without Avery's oversight. Major Thomas sneered at her, muttering under his breath, "Just a mechanic. Let's see how far she gets us." Avery's fingers tapped lightly on the control pad. The jet was ready. It had already learned her commands. And when the time came, it would respond flawlessly, whether the pilots believed in her or not. Rhodes observed silently, understanding something he could not yet articulate. Avery Lane had long been underestimated, ignored, and dismissed. Yet here she stood, orchestrating the jet's every move with quiet precision. The pilots mocked her, but the F-22 had already chosen its master. And Rhodes knew, when the demonstration began, when the eyes of the Pentagon were on the line, Avery's abilities would no longer be invisible. The system she had built, the bond she had forged with the aircraft, would speak louder than any doubt or ridicule. As she stepped back, brushing her coveralls clean, Avery allowed herself a brief glance at the pilots. Some were still laughing, some shaking their heads in disbelief, none realizing that the machine they were preparing to fly had already acknowledged her authority. She turned to Rhodes, her gaze calm and assured. "Everything is ready," she said. "We'll see who truly commands the F-22 soon enough." Rhodes nodded, silently acknowledging the gravity of her words. The world above the hangar, the pilots, the Pentagon, none of them yet understood the quiet storm about to unfold. And in that moment, the tension, the mockery, the doubt, all faded into the background. Avery Lane had proven one undeniable fact. The F-22 listened to her voice. Only hers. And when the demonstration came, the world would have no choice but to see it. The morning of the Pentagon demonstration arrived with a tension that seemed to hum through the air like static electricity. Nellie's Air Force Base was alive with activity. Officials, pilots, technicians, and media liaisons moved through the hangar and airfield with practiced efficiency, though the weight of expectation pressed down on everyone. Avery Lane arrived early, her coveralls neatly tucked, hands clean, but her mind fully occupied with the F-22. She knew what the world expected of her, nothing. And yet she also knew what the jet expected of her, everything. Pilots gathered around, confident and brimming with bravado. Major Thomas stood at the forefront, exuding authority and irritation in equal measure. "Remember, people," he barked, "we fly, we perform, and we impress. Mechanics handle the pre-flight checks, we handle the sky." His tone was dismissive, almost mocking, aimed directly at Avery. She gave a faint nod, not a word escaping her lips. Let them underestimate her. They always did. But today, under the critical eyes of the Pentagon, under the pressure of public scrutiny, She would demonstrate what it truly meant to command the F-22. Rhodes lingered at the back, notebook in hand, observing the preparations. He had watched Avery work countless times, but today felt different. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Everyone expected a smooth, routine demonstration until it began. As the pilots climbed into the cockpit and initiated the startup sequence, the F-22's engines roared to life with a deep, controlled hum. Sensors lit up, control surfaces responded, and the aircraft seemed poised, almost confident. Then it happened. The first anomaly was subtle, a twitch of the landing gear that no one noticed except Avery. She murmured under her breath, "Not yet, hold." But as the pilots attempted to taxi, the jet jolted violently, refusing to respond to their controls. Engines surged erratically, flaps misaligned, the nose veered slightly to the side. Panic rippled through the pilots. "What the hell?" one shouted, gripping the joystick with white-knuckled tension. Another muttered, "It's not responding." Major Thomas barked orders, his face flushed with frustration. "Abort! Shut it down!" He slammed buttons, trying to force the system into manual override, but the jet resisted. Each command seemed to worsen the instability. The crowd of Pentagon officials and observers fell silent, eyes wide with alarm. The demonstration, meant to showcase the F-22's superiority, was turning into a nightmare. A small fuel truck sat dangerously close to the tarmac, and the jet's erratic movements threatened a catastrophic accident. Rhodes turned to Avery, voice urgent. "You have to stop it. Only you can stabilize it." Avery's calm demeanor never wavered. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the chaos wash over her. Years of experience of being underestimated had prepared her for moments like this. The world doubted her, mocked her, called her just a mechanic. But the F-22 knew better. She stepped forward, ignoring the panic around her, and approached the jet. The hangar doors groaned as she walked past the crowd, every eye now on her. Pilots muttered, some in disbelief, some in contempt. "What is she doing?" Thomas barked. "Stay back, this is pilot territory." But Avery didn't stop. She moved into position within the jet's sensor range, standing before the machine that had been her silent partner for years. Her voice, calm and precise, cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Raptor," she commanded, "hold position. Emergency override engaged." The jet responded instantly. Engines stabilized, landing gear locked, control surfaces aligned perfectly. The sudden obedience drew gasps from the crowd. Pentagon officials murmured among themselves, stunned by the sudden correction. Avery didn't pause. She followed with another command, more technical and exact. "Run core diagnostic. Isolate failure branches. Engage full system stabilization." The F-22 obeyed, moving with the fluid precision of a machine fully in sync with its master. Major Thomas's face turned pale. The pilots froze, unsure whether to intervene. The jet, once erratic and dangerous, now hummed smoothly, engine steady, sensors aligned. Rhodes stepped forward, awe and relief evident in his expression. He had warned them. He had known Avery's skill, but seeing it enacted under pressure left him speechless. This was more than technical knowledge. This was control, understanding, and authority condensed into a single human voice. Avery continued her silent dance with the aircraft, hands adjusting minor interface modules as she spoke in precise, calm tones. The F-22 responded instantly to every command. Each adjustment reinforced the jet's obedience, proving what she had known all along. The system recognized her. She was its true pilot, its rightful controller, even if no official document granted her that title. The crowd began to realize something monumental had happened. Pilots who had doubted her now looked on in awe, their prior mockery replaced by uncertainty. The Pentagon observers whispered urgently among themselves, consulting notes and murmuring about protocols they had never anticipated needing. Avery, standing tall in her coveralls, issued one final set of commands to fully stabilize the jet. "Confirm flight readiness. Engage auxiliary systems. Stand by for takeoff sequence." The F-22, now perfectly synchronized, waited obediently, engines purring. Rhodes couldn't contain himself. "This is incredible," he said quietly, almost to himself. Avery glanced at him briefly, a small smile of acknowledgement crossing her face. She didn't need to explain anything. The demonstration had already been won. The pilots and officials could see the results with their own eyes. The F-22 had obeyed her voice when no one else's commands could control it. Major Thomas approached cautiously, anger and disbelief mingling on his face. "Explain this," he demanded, gesturing toward the jet. "Why did it respond to her?" Rhodes stepped forward, giving Avery room. She met Thomas's gaze evenly, calm and resolute. "I built the system," she said simply. "It recognizes authorized commands from ground personnel with verified credentials in emergencies. It will obey the operator. That operator is me." A stunned silence fell over the hangar. Pilots exchanged glances, unsure whether to be angry, impressed, or both. Pentagon officials scribbled notes furiously, some whispering urgently to their superiors. The demonstration, initially a disaster, had transformed into an astonishing display of precision, skill, and technological mastery. Avery Lane, the woman they had overlooked, had turned potential catastrophe into undeniable authority. Rhodes placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did it," he whispered. Avery nodded, but her eyes never left the F-22. She knew this was only the beginning. Recognition would follow, but the real work, was far from over. Today, she had proven she could control the jet when no pilot could. Tomorrow, she would ensure that the system she built would be trusted, respected, and never dismissed again. The demonstration ended, but the echoes of what had happened would linger. The F-22 sat obediently, silent now but fully operational. Avery Lane, once just a mechanic, had commanded one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. And in that moment, everyone understood one undeniable truth. The jet responded not to rank, not to experience, but to knowledge and authority, her knowledge, her authority, her voice. The hangar was silent except for the soft hum of the F-22 Raptor, its engines idling smoothly after the morning's chaos. Pentagon officials leaned forward in disbelief, notebooks in hand, scribbling frantic observations. Pilots who had once mocked Avery Lane now stood frozen, eyes wide with a mix of fear, awe, and something new: respect. Avery remained calm, her hands lightly resting on the diagnostic console as she assessed the jet's status. Her voice, precise and authoritative, was the only thing the F-22 needed to obey. "Raptor," she said clearly, her tone both soft and commanding, "hold position. Emergency override engaged." The jet responded instantly. Its engine stabilized, the nose leveled, and the landing gear locked into perfect alignment. Rhodes, watching from the side, couldn't suppress a low whistle. Even in simulations, he had never seen this level of responsiveness. The pilot's hands twitched near their controls, unsure whether to intervene, but Avery's calm authority was undeniable. Every subtle command she spoke was followed with perfect execution. "Run full system diagnostics," Avery continued. "Isolate all anomalies. Confirm auxiliary link integrity." The F-22 shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, then settled. A green light blinked on the control panel, signaling that all systems were fully operational. Observers gasped. The demonstration had begun as a near catastrophe, but Avery had turned it into a flawless display of precision and control. The difference was stark. The jet obeyed her, not the pilots. The truth of her mastery was undeniable. Major Thomas, his face pale with disbelief, stepped closer. "Explain this," he demanded, voice trembling slightly. "Why does it respond to her? She isn't even in the cockpit." Avery's gaze remained steady. "The system is designed to recognize verified ground operators in emergencies. It will respond only to authorized commands. That operator is me." She spoke the words with quiet certainty, and the jet seemed to resonate with her authority. Rhodes nodded beside her, silently supporting her explanation. The crowd leaned in, officials murmuring urgently to one another. "She's controlling it remotely," one muttered. "It's impossible. The manuals say it can't interpret natural speech with this accuracy." Avery gave no reply. She didn't need to defend her abilities. The jet itself was proof. Every surface, every sensor, every engine adjustment reflected her commands perfectly. The F-22 had obeyed her voice when no pilot could assert control. One of the junior pilots, trembling slightly, tried to input a command manually. The F-22 resisted. The engine sputtered for a moment, flinching away from the unauthorized input. Avery's voice cut through, calm but firm. "Do not override. Stand by for system alignment." Instantly, the aircraft corrected itself, demonstrating that its loyalty lay only with her. Gasps spread through the hangar. For the first time, even the pilots realized that the mechanics of the jet were secondary to the authority behind the commands. Avery moved gracefully around the console, issuing a series of complex commands. Engage auxiliary stabilization, recalibrate flight sensors, run simulated takeoff sequence. The F-22 responded with perfect fluidity. Its engines hummed with life, wing flaps adjusted smoothly, and the landing gear aligned seamlessly for a virtual takeoff. The jet was alive, but it was her command that animated it. Rhodes felt a thrill run down his spine. This was mastery in its purest form, authority over a machine that defied ordinary comprehension. The Pentagon officials, scribbling furiously, whispered among themselves. One muttered, she's doing what no pilot could. Another said, "It's not just skill, it's understanding. The jet recognizes her." The room vibrated with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Avery's quiet composure contrasted sharply with the previous chaos. While everyone else had panicked when the F-22 malfunctioned, she had acted decisively, precisely, and without hesitation. "Run emergency override scenario," Avery commanded. "Simulate failure of primary systems. Maintain operational stability." The jet responded instantly. In a split second, it recalibrated its systems, maintaining perfect balance despite the simulated failure. The lights on the control panel blinked in sequence, signaling success. Pilots shifted uncomfortably, realizing their prior assumptions had been entirely wrong. Avery's voice, steady and unwavering, was the only authority the jet acknowledged. No cockpit training, no rank, no experience mattered. The F-22 had chosen its true operator, and it was Avery Lane. Major Thomas's face had turned a deep red. He opened his mouth to speak, but Avery interrupted softly, "Respect the system. It will obey knowledge, not titles." The words were calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of undeniable truth. The F-22 hummed in agreement, its systems perfectly aligned. Rhodes glanced at her in admiration, realizing that she had not only commanded the aircraft but had also commanded respect through her skill. Avery then initiated a full-flight simulation, speaking commands as if she were piloting the jet in real time. "Increase throttle, adjust pitch for ascent, engage stealth mode, execute evasive maneuvers." The F-22 responded flawlessly, banking as if it were in midair, adjusting sensors and engines with precision. The observers watched in stunned silence, some holding their heads, others whispering urgent notes. No one moved. No one dared to touch the controls. It was clear, the jet obeyed only her. "Confirm operational readiness," Avery said finally, her voice calm, commanding, and precise. The jet responded instantly, lights blinking green across the panel. All systems were stable. It was as if the aircraft itself were taking a bow before her authority. Rhodes exhaled slowly, feeling both relief and exhilaration. The demonstration had become a testament not just to technology, but to Avery's unmatched expertise and control. The pilots' reactions were a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some whispered apologies under their breath, others simply stared, mouths open. Major Thomas finally stepped forward, defeated but forced to acknowledge the reality. The system worked perfectly, and its obedience lay with Avery Lane. The F-22, a machine designed for elite pilots, had recognized her as its true operator. Rhodes stepped beside her as the room slowly regained composure. You did it," he said softly. Avery nodded, eyes still on the aircraft. "The jet obeys knowledge, not rank," she replied, her tone calm but final. She didn't need recognition, yet the acknowledgement in the room was unmistakable. For the first time, the world understood the depth of her skill. The Pentagon officials whispered among themselves, discussing protocol changes, emergency procedures, and how to integrate Avery's abilities into future operations. Pilots, once skeptical, were beginning to understand the magnitude of her control. The F-22 sat obediently, fully operational, responding perfectly to every command. It had obeyed her voice when no one else could, proving the unarguable truth. Avery Lane was the master of the jet. As the demonstration concluded, Avery stepped back, letting the jet return to idle mode. She allowed herself a brief smile, acknowledging Rhodes with a nod. The silent storm of mockery, doubt, and chaos had passed. The F-22 had recognized her authority, and in the minds of everyone present there could be no question. She was extraordinary. The day after the Pentagon demonstration, the atmosphere at Nellis Air Force Base had changed dramatically. Avery Lane arrived early as usual, but today she was met with something new, curiosity mixed with caution. Pilots who had mocked her just yesterday now approached with measured respect, their previous derision replaced by subtle nods and hesitant greetings. Even Major Thomas, though his pride bristled, walked past her with a stiff acknowledgement. The chaos of the demonstration had shifted perceptions. Avery was no longer just a mechanic. She was the person who had tamed one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. Lieutenant Rhodes stood at the edge of the hangar, notebook in hand, observing the subtle transformation. He had expected resistance from the pilots, but the change was almost immediate. Overnight, word had spread of Avery's command over the F-22. Pentagon officials had already sent memos emphasizing the importance of her role in future demonstrations and operational readiness protocols. Even the most skeptical pilots were now approaching her, silently acknowledging the skill and authority that they had once ignored. Avery crouched beside the F-22, fingers tracing the control panel as she ran through post-demonstration diagnostics. The jet responded instantly to her voice commands, sensors aligning, engines humming steadily. She had spent years perfecting this system, understanding its nuances, and now the recognition she had long been denied was beginning to manifest. Rhodes approached quietly. "They're starting to understand," he said, gesturing to a group of pilots observing her from a distance. "They can't deny it anymore. You're extraordinary." Avery gave a faint smile, her focus never leaving the jet. "Extraordinary isn't enough," she murmured. "They need to trust the system. That's the real challenge." Her words were quiet, almost humble, but they carried the weight of someone who had been underestimated for years. She had learned patience, precision, and how to demonstrate authority without confrontation. Today was just the beginning. Major Thomas approached, his expression conflicted. Pride battled with irritation, authority with humility. "Lane," he said finally, voice tight, we didn't realize the system could operate like that. You handled it flawlessly." Avery didn't flinch. "The system is designed to respond to authorized operators. It follows knowledge, not rank," she replied calmly. "It doesn't recognize ego or titles, only understanding." The words were simple, but their impact was immediate. Pilots shifted uncomfortably, realizing the truth in her statement. The F-22 had obeyed her voice when no one else's commands could assert control. Her expertise had been undeniable, and the respect she now commanded was hard-earned but unquestionable. Rhodes glanced at her, admiration evident. "So, what happens now?" he asked softly. "Do they finally give you the recognition you deserve?" Avery shook her head, hands still moving over the control panel. "Recognition isn't the goal, trust is. They need to trust the system and me before anything else matters." Her voice was firm, yet calm, a reflection of the quiet authority she had cultivated over years of being overlooked. The group of pilots slowly approached, their demeanor cautious but respectful. One of the younger pilots cleared his throat. "Lane, we wanted to thank you for yesterday. I didn't believe it would work, but wow." Avery looked up briefly, acknowledging him with a small nod. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's not about belief. It's about understanding and preparation. The jet responds only to commands it recognizes, commands it knows are correct. That's all." Another pilot, more senior, stepped forward, still hesitant. "We've flown these jets for years," he admitted. "We've trained under every condition, but you controlled it when we couldn't. That takes skill." Avery's expression remained calm. "It's not about skill in the cockpit," she said. "It's about knowledge of the system. If you want to operate it safely and effectively, you need to respect how it functions. That starts with listening and understanding." As the pilots absorbed her words, Rhodes noticed a subtle shift in the hangar. The mockery of yesterday had vanished, replaced by a quiet reverence. Avery Lane, once dismissed, had become a linchpin, the person whose authority over the F-22 could no longer be questioned. The jet systems were her domain, and even those who had once doubted her now recognized that reality. Pentagon officials began arriving to oversee post-demonstration procedures. They spoke in hushed tones, acknowledging Avery's role and requesting detailed briefings on her methods and protocols. Avery, calm and collected, walked through each step meticulously, explaining the neural interface, voice command calibration, and emergency override procedures. Every word she spoke reinforced the undeniable truth. She had earned her position not through rank or title, but through mastery and preparation. One official, a senior lieutenant colonel, stepped closer, eyes sharp with curiosity. "Lane, we need you to document everything. Procedures, contingencies, command protocols, everything. Your work will guide all future operations with the F-22. Avery nodded, her calm demeanor unwavering. "Understood," she replied. "I'll ensure the system functions flawlessly and that operators respect it. That's the only way it works." As the day progressed, pilots continued to gather around, asking questions, seeking guidance, and observing her demonstrations. The previous tension had dissipated, replaced by a sense of collaborative learning. Avery's authority was no longer questioned. It was respected. And as she guided the pilots through detailed procedures, Rhodes noted the subtle changes in their posture, the attentiveness in their eyes. For the first time, they understood that control over the F-22 was not about ego or bravado. It was about knowledge, precision, and the quiet authority of a voice that commanded respect. By evening, the hangar had quieted. Avery leaned against the F-22, brushing her hands clean, her work for the day complete. Rhodes approached, notebook in hand, a small smile on his face. "You've changed everything," he said softly. "They finally see what we've known all along." Avery looked at him, eyes calm, reflective. "They'll see it in practice, not words," she replied. "Recognition is temporary, trust is permanent. The F-22 listens, and that's what matters." As they stood together, the sun setting over the base, a sense of quiet triumph settled over them. Avery Lane, once underestimated and overlooked, had earned respect, trust, and authority through skill, knowledge, and determination. The F-22 sat obediently beside her, a testament to her mastery. The pilots, once skeptical, now understood the weight of her command. And Rhodes realized that her impact would extend far beyond the hangar, shaping the way the military approached technology, authority, and the definition of expertise. The path ahead was still uncertain. Protocols would need adjustment, hierarchies challenged, and trust continually reinforced. But for now, Avery Lane had proven one undeniable truth. Skill, preparation, and understanding could command even the most advanced machines, earning respect where it was long overdue. Weeks had passed since the Pentagon demonstration, and Nellie's Air Force Base had transformed. The once dismissive pilots moved with caution around Avery Lane, acknowledging her presence with a newfound respect that bordered on reverence. The F-22 Raptor, now fully operational under her guidance, stood proudly in the center of the hangar, gleaming under the fluorescent lights as if aware of the extraordinary operator who commanded it. Avery arrived early, her usual calm demeanor unchanged, though there was a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. She had spent these weeks refining the system, implementing feedback from both pilots and Pentagon officials, and documenting every procedure with meticulous precision. The pilots had begun approaching her voluntarily, asking questions, seeking guidance, and learning from her expertise. Even Major Thomas, once skeptical and dismissive, had become a reluctant student, recognizing that Avery's knowledge surpassed any amount of flight experience. Lieutenant Rhodes watched from a distance, notebook in hand, marveling at the transformation. He had known from the beginning that Avery was extraordinary, but seeing the full impact of her authority, the way the pilots deferred, the respect in their voices, the efficiency of the hangar was awe-inspiring. The shift wasn't just in perception, it was structural. Protocols had been rewritten, responsibilities redistributed, and the culture of the base subtly but irrevocably changed. Avery crouched beside the F-22, running a final pre-flight diagnostic. Her voice, calm and commanding, flowed effortlessly over the console. Confirm system alignment. Engage auxiliary protocols. Prepare for training simulation. The jet responded instantly, its engines humming smoothly, sensors aligning perfectly, flaps adjusting with precision. Every movement of the aircraft reflected her mastery, a testament to the countless hours she had spent learning, designing, and perfecting the neural interface. A group of pilots approached, their expressions a mixture of anticipation and admiration. One of the younger ones, hesitant but eager to understand, spoke first. "Lane, would you oversee our flight today? We want to ensure we follow the protocols correctly." Avery glanced up, her eyes calm but sharp. "Follow the system, not instinct," she said. "Respect the aircraft and its responses. Listen and it will obey." Her voice carried authority, yet there was no arrogance. She had learned that true command came from respect and understanding, not fear or force. The pilots nodded, absorbing her instructions. They had learned quickly over the past weeks that the F-22 was more than a machine. It was a responsive partner, one that required precise knowledge to guide. Under Avery's watchful eye, they moved with careful deliberation, following her commands as she issued adjustments and corrections. The shift in the hangar's atmosphere was palpable. Where there had once been mockery, there was now collaboration. Where there had been doubt, there was now trust. Major Thomas stepped forward, observing Avery's interaction with the pilots. He cleared his throat, voice tinged with both respect and lingering disbelief. "Lane, you've done something remarkable here. Not just with the jet, but with the team. They listened because you earned it, not because you forced it." Avery nodded, her hands moving over the console to issue one final set of commands. "Authority is not given," she said quietly. "It's demonstrated. Trust is earned, not assumed." The F-22 listens to those who understand it, and it has chosen its operator. Rhodes stepped closer, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's more than respect," he said softly. "It's awe. They've realized what I realized long ago. You're the voice of this jet." Avery allowed herself a faint smile. "The jet obeys only what it recognizes as knowledge," she replied. "That's why understanding matters more than rank." She straightened, moving to the center of the hangar, where the F-22 waited silently, engines humming in perfect alignment. A training simulation was scheduled for the afternoon, an exercise designed to test the pilots' understanding of the system under Avery's guidance. The base buzzed with controlled anticipation. Avery moved alongside the pilots, issuing commands, observing their responses, and making subtle adjustments. The F-22 responded flawlessly to every instruction she gave, each movement precise, controlled, and harmonious. The pilots began to realize that the system wasn't just obeying her voice, it was teaching them, guiding them toward understanding. One of the younger pilots hesitated during a maneuver, unsure whether to override a command. Avery's voice cut through, calm and firm. "Trust the system. Listen and respond. Override only when necessary and only with knowledge." The pilot followed her advice, and the F-22 adjusted instantly, stabilizing as if recognizing the operator's intent. Rhodes watched silently, amazed at the balance of authority and guidance Avery maintained. She was not just commanding the jet, she was shaping the pilot's understanding of it. By the end of the exercise, every pilot had completed the simulation flawlessly. The F-22 had obeyed without error, responding to Avery's commands while also teaching the crew the intricacies of its systems. The atmosphere in the hangar was electric, a mix of relief, admiration, and awe. Major Thomas approached Avery once again, face more composed now, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Lane, I have to admit it," he said. "I underestimated you, completely. You've changed everything here." Avery's calm gaze met his. "It wasn't about changing anything for you," she said. "It was about demonstrating what's possible when knowledge, preparation, and understanding are applied correctly. The jet listens to expertise, not ego, and that's a lesson for everyone here." Her words resonated through the hangar, settling like a quiet decree. The pilots nodded, and even Thomas allowed a small, respectful smile. Pentagon officials, observing from a distance, took careful notes. Avery had not only proven the jet's capabilities, but also demonstrated the potential for improved training, safer protocols, and a deeper integration of human expertise with advanced systems. Her work would shape policy, influence future training programs, and set a standard for how the military approached technological mastery. As the day drew to a close, Avery stood alone beside the F-22, the hangar emptying around her. Rhodes approached, notebook in hand, a small smile of admiration on his face. "You did it," he said softly. "You've proven yourself, and they finally understand." Avery gazed at the jet, engines softly humming. "It wasn't about proving myself," she replied. "It was about proving what's possible. Knowledge, preparation, and respect, that's the real command." She stepped back, hands resting lightly on her coveralls. The F-22 sat obediently beside her, silent but ready, a symbol of her mastery, patience, and unparalleled skill. Rhodes nodded, understanding the full scope of her achievement. Avery Lane, once overlooked and underestimated, had become a legend in her own right. She had commanded one of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, earned the respect of the pilots, the Pentagon, and her peers, and reshaped the very culture of the base. The F-22, now more than a machine, was a testament to her vision, her authority, and her voice. And as the sun set over Nellis Air Force Base, casting long shadows across the tarmac, Avery Lane stood tall, calm, and resolute. She had proven that true mastery came not from rank or ego, but from knowledge, preparation, and the quiet authority of a voice that demanded respect. A voice that the F-22 and the world could no longer ignore.